Hi everyone. Today is episode 3 of Queer Undead, and today's topic is evil. Yeah.
Ooh.
I'm really excited for this topic. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of ground we can cover.
Well, it applies to everything. It's kind of like an underlying foundation of the world. So
What exactly did you want to achieve with this discussion?
I think it's a pretty broad topic, but I think, like you said, it can cover a lot of different things. And I think even though people have like moved away from ideas of good and evil or they think that they've moved away from it or something, like people feel like they've moved away from religion and like mysticism and magic and superstition. And like my idea is that people think that good and evil kind of belong to the old world in a way. But then you still hear people like out of habit being like, can you believe that? It's just evil and stuff. And like, I don't think psychologically, at least, we've moved on from it. Like, I don't think people experientially have moved on from it. And I think it still takes like quite a high level of understanding and engagement with and separation from the world to achieve a headspace where you are not treating things as evil. And that's something I'm interested in doing. And I'm interested in religion, and I still think it's something the world needs because people don't have the toolbox to be independent or individual yet. And I'm interested to hear what you think evil is.
Right. Well, I think you mentioned that people haven't overcome the domain of evil. But I also think that you can't overcome the domain of evil. It's like a deeply ingrained thing that's not just in the society, but I also think it's within your mind. Like the concept of evil is something that we have developed as a species. Having said that, I teach English to Japanese students, and one of my students, he's a high school student, and he's pretty switched on. He once asked me, what's the difference between a bad thing and an evil thing? And I was like really floored by this question. And I got to thinking, like, why did he ask that question? And sure enough, like the word for evil in Japanese is basically the same as bad, aku, or like warui. And like the kanji for it, if you break it down, it literally means like inferior heart or like sub heart, something like that.
Yeah, like impure or something.
As if like, well, it's actions that come from like an impure space or like a heart that is not fully developed. So it made me realize just how the concept of evil, it varies greatly depending on culture to culture. Like the way that it's expressed, I should say. I think the basic concept of evil is, universal. I think there's a lot of there's things that we could agree on as like regardless of culture that are like evil. The concept of evil, that as we know it from a Western perspective, is deeply intertwined with Christianity.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that, a culture like Japan that hasn't had a large exposure to Christianity wouldn't necessarily have the tools to, the conceptual tools to differentiate between these two things. It's actually a very difficult question to say what's the difference between bad and evil. It's almost just like we intuitively know the difference. But when it comes down to like specifically defining certain actions, it's hard to draw the line where, some things are bad, but they're not evil.
Yeah. I think it's like evil is like this force that is like fundamentally and intrinsically and irrevocably bad. Whereas something can be bad without it being too deep or something. The way people say it, at least, is like, it's evil. It's like they can't express it in any other way than completely rejecting it. And I kind of think that that's what it's about, is about rejection and separation, you know, like the classic dualism. Like it's a real fundamental social and religious dualism that like you have to go towards good and away from evil and stuff. And the words are kind of just there to help you define what that is. But like, I mean, it's so reliant on context as well. I think like what I meant about overcoming evil, I mean, it's not about overcoming evil, but like about overcoming the dualism and like seeing behind that dualism and not living in a reactionary and negative stance to things outside of you or whatever, you know? Like people generally use it to differentiate themselves from like an other, and like that thing is the bad thing and I'm the good thing.
I feel like, well, the domain of evil is basically all the parts of yourself and your community that you don't want to be expressed.
Mm.
And yeah, a lot of people are very quick to divorce themselves from evil deeds. But people are not very far from committing evil acts, basically.
Yeah.
And it requires a great deal of self-polishing to be able to discern your own actions and to deem them as good or evil. I feel that in the West, we have a tendency to, rather than incorporate our evil personalities into ourselves so that we can like master them, we just repress evil desires in a way that is not optimal or healthy, and also creates a lot of tension, and like the evil comes out in other ways.
Yeah. Well, and it's projected onto other people a lot of the time. I mean, like it's always stewing there, and like as soon as there's an opportunity for it to come out through something else, everyone's like, yes. You know, like all the people, like the white people in America who are just like waiting for there to be like the slightest toe out of line from like a black person or whatever.
I also find it interesting that there seems to be people where it's like okay to treat them badly. It's almost like they become a effigy for people's like
Abuse.
socially acceptable abuse.
Mm.
Like Kanye is an example of that. I feel like a lot of white people use Kanye as a means to like have a socially acceptable and viable outlet for their racism.
Rap in general, like people who like even like, yeah, no, I don't like rap. I don't like the content and shit. It's like, come on, just say it. I think like a bigger problem that we're having though than evil in the current day is like ambivalence or whatever, or even like agnosticism almost. The majority of the culture, or like the kind of mass of the culture, is like made up of people who just stay far enough out of anything to be caught up in any blame from it or like be seen as doing anything wrong. And it's like this real passive goodness that kind of comes out of Christianity, you know, like meekness or something. I mean, like I'm not against Christianity and Christian teaching, but I think that there has been some wrong turns along the way. I mean, even identity politics is catching on to that, you know, it's like, you know, if you're not anti-racist, you may as well just be racist. And like, I do agree to a certain extent, even though I don't like subscribe to that approach that like a lot of people are taking. But like, you know, the fact that people just spend their lives so idly, like sitting in an office or doing, you know, just playing out a system or a plan or a map or whatever, like just means that it's at the whim of whoever is active enough to push it. And that usually ends up being people who are like more aggressive or even evil. And like then people are super quick to show shock and like disgust at things that are like collectively or culturally deemed to be evil. And that like more or less reestablishes the same system of corruption that produces the evil, you know? And it's like, I think it's better to be a bit evil and a bit motivated and a bit active and like, yeah, whole. It's like about being whole and like having like both sides of yourself and shit than it is to just like step out of that and not have like any real qualitative input into life and relationships and society and shit.
Well, it's just like stagnation of evil desires just compounds the monstrosity of it. If you just like leave a sandwich to like rot in some corner of your room, it's like gonna get worse and worse, right? So like it's the same with evil. There's no real confrontation with evil or no dialogue with evil in a way that isn't just simply like derision or demonization.
But it's such passive demonization anyway. It's like, it's all set up, you know? Like, it's like they just show it to you on the news and then you know what is the evil thing and then you can talk to your friends about how you all hate it. And it's like, it may as well not be there.
Well, also a side effect of like putting the focal point of evil onto very specific people or events is that you overlook the ways in which evil is everywhere. So that it's sort of like a smokescreen that prevents you from really analyzing your own ways in which you contribute to that evil. It's societies that create terrorists and rapists, and they're partaking in the same society that we are.
Yeah, and we are all producing that together. Like, yeah, the lack of input into it is producing it. I mean, everyone has micro evils, like microaggressions in them, you know, like urges and shit. And like everyone's so scared of that being seen or noticed or visible to themselves even, that they basically live like a cardboard cutout version of existence or whatever. But you know, like if you just like let it out a little bit at the time, either you learn how to deal with it, or it's even just not that bad, you know, like. But it's like if it builds up so much, then of course it becomes like a big outburst and shit.
Evil people also desire to be saved. So it comes to a point where their evil is so all-encompassing that they just lash out.
Because there's no one to share it. Like people don't share the weight of it.
Well, they feel that they can't.
Yeah.
The avenues aren't there. And that's probably more the case with disenfranchised people. It's like, what was that tweet that you tweeted once? Fear of death causes nuclear weapons. Like that's the buzz. Like if you're creating an environment where you're like oppressing and stifling evil intentions, then they just like build up and it comes to a point where they get expressed in this really grotesque way.
When you just end up finding like legal reasons or legal ways to let it out. I mean, that's what the law really is, you know? It's like there are good people and bad people, so we're gonna save up our violence and use it on the bad people. And like, I mean, that's what war is as well, like you're saying. Like, we have to do this in the name of goodness, you know? And it's like, no, you don't. You could just not do it. It would be great if you didn't do it. Yeah, like last week there was a shooting in a mosque in Christchurch, and I'm sure most people know about it. And it was like by far the worst terrorist attack we've had in New Zealand, maybe ever. And like I went to like a gathering for it, and there were talks about what it means for like the Muslim community and the kind of multiculturalism in New Zealand and stuff. And like the thing that really upset me about it wasn't the fact that people had died, and that like it was a white Australian guy who had come here specifically to do it, to show that people aren't safe anywhere, even New Zealand, because everyone thinks New Zealand is safe and shit. But like the worst thing for me was that we don't have that kind of community gathering usually, and like on a normal basis. Like it took like a major tragedy for like everyone to come together for some reason, that like for a wholesome reason almost. And that like I don't know, like I really felt like a lot more emotionally rather than just conceptually, that it's what we're doing all the time that produces violence. Like the safety and legality and like repression of everything that we do all the time is directly like what produces violence, like abstract violence kind of. And like the real tragic thing about it is that that is what like the Muslim community is doing. Like they have like you know, they all go to the mosque every Friday and like share their belief and their practice and like their holy space and their devotion, and like cultivate all the healthy emotional and spiritual and social and communal things that we all need. And that's the specific thing that someone chose to go and shut down with a gun. Like out of all the things that you could shoot, like you shoot the like group that is really doing the like healthy spiritual work.
And that's definitely intentional, I think.
Well, yeah, it's like that's like the culmination of the repression, is that you like get so wound up about it that you think that the people doing that are the evil ones. But yeah, like I think in Japan, like, I mean, I know there is still like an element of like fear politics and like us and them and whatever. But like in anime, for example, it's like most of the time the bad guys in the story aren't just intrinsically evil. There's some kind of reason why they're doing what they're doing. And there's like a part of the story is showing how they came to think that that was what they needed to do to like correct the world or some shit. And that's like a kind of narrative that we like hardly ever have in the West, you know? Like it's like everyone now feels a lot more comfortable that like they can all collectively hate racists and rapists and men and white people and stuff. But it's like that's still doing the same behavior. It's still a cop-out. Like it's still just like taking the easy option, being like, oh, well, that's evil and it's not me, so I'm good and actually the world's fine. And it's like, nah, it's not. Like the world is unbalanced on like a way deeper basis than that.
Also, comparatively, I think most people would agree that there's less evil in Japan than in other first world countries.
Why is that though?
Well, I mean, there's definitely a communal value here, which is represented in both the grammar of the language and the main.
What about the like rape culture there though? Or like chikan? I mean,
Right.
it's not really like evil though. It's just repressed.
Yeah,
it's
that's
just like misguided. It's like deeply repressed. Like I'm not condoning it, but it's like, I mean, even the attitude towards that, and also like fetishes and preferences and stuff, seems a lot more broadly accepting or justifying rather than condemning, even if people think it's wrong and agree that it's wrong.
I've just thought now that like it seems like a prerequisite of evil is like having an ego, and ego doesn't exist in Japan in the same way that it does in the West. So an act like chikan or like sexual harassment seems more like a communal problem rather than an individual problem, which is very hard to explain in English. Like the result is the same, but the origin or the reason for it seems to be in a place that is not strictly evil.
Well, it seems like a lot of things are like expressed not as personal experience so much as occurrence, you know? It's like it's something occurred, and like it doesn't have to be personal to you or attached to you, you know, or like your responsibility necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the ego thing, it's like that's the real epidemic in the West, is that like at some point we were like, no, ego's great. And like, let's just do everything based on ego. But like still in Japan, it's more like this small external thing. Like it's not, you know, not a Western thing, but like some people have that and we don't really like it, but it's just this, you know, it's whatever, you know. Like some people are arrogant, but
well, one time I was sexually harassed in an onsen, and like when it was happening to me, I was like, this is actually not that bad. I could understand the intentions of the person who was like harassing me. It's almost as if, well, the English language tends to isolate subjects, right? And Japanese doesn't do that. If you say, like, for example, like chikan sareta in English would mean like I was sexually harassed. It's the I doesn't exist when you say it in Japanese, focusing specifically on the act. So there's sort of like a distance between your ego and the event that is happening to you, because it's not happening to you, it's just like the event is like being caused.
Oh, I mean, there's still like a direction though, you know. If you say like sarita, it's like you're still acknowledging which body it came from and to,
right?
The passive and the active, but it's like it's not dominated by identity.
Well, you're not the focal point of it. There's a direction involved, but it's not about you. I think that might also be in Japan or in collective cultures in general. People are much better at managing traumatic events.
Well, I think having like a shared cultural foundation where everyone knows the boundaries is like a huge advantage in that, you know. And like that's something that we don't have like in an individualist culture, because it's like, well, actually I don't believe that, so I don't have to do that. And it's like constant clashing between like identities, but it's like people just then use that to facilitate whatever like emotional responses they're having to things, which are usually misguided or unbalanced. So it's like shitstorm.
When evil happens to you and you have like a egocentric personality, which that kind of personality is encouraged by the language and the society. Yeah, you no longer have immediate access to the community. You have to like reach out and risk your like dignity or your like social positions, because like it's like people look down on people who have been raped and things like that, which is probably a much deeper issue than what it seems at the surface. Why is it that you think that people who receive evil are like treated with suspicion?
Because they're like contaminated by it or something, and it's like you lose your purity or something.
Right.
But yeah, I think like a lot of the time it's like things are just stated as fact, like in Japanese and in Japan. And I really found like the difference there, like when I was teaching English, I'd be trying to get them to have like a conversation. So they'd say something like, I like J-pop or whatever. And I'd be like, so why? And they're like, you know, like in English, it's like all about explaining. There's all this explaining labor to do because like nothing's shared.
Yeah.
But like in Japan, it's like most things are shared. And if it's not shared, you're sharing a fact with them or whatever. It's like, I mean, even if there's disagreements, it's kind of like they just play out. There's not like personal loss and gain so much.
Well, also, in collective cultures, you don't really need a why because everyone already knows the why.
Yeah. But it's like, why do you need it anyway? Like, what are you so desperate for? Like, it's like everyone wants to know. And it's like, what is the knowing anyway?
Well, knowing certainly increases the chances of evil.
Well, yeah, it's like this manipulative thing. It's like trying to get all the points so you can like control them or whatever.
And the more points you know, the more likely it is that one of those points is gonna like touch a nerve or like, well, contaminate you and curse you. When that process happens, it's like a domino effect where you spiral down into this tiny like rabbit hole that only you is in. That's what creates individuality, but like individuality in a way that isn't good for people, a way that isn't healthy.
Well, that's like what this culture of being triggered is about. Like that's what being triggered is, and that's exactly it. Like the more points or barriers you set up in your complex representation of the world and shit, like the sooner you're gonna run into one and shit. But
Right.
it's like it is possible to just sit back from that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what is there really much value in the complexity in the first place?
I don't think so.
I mean, if you think about like the difference in philosophy between Western and Asian cultures, I think it's pretty clear that Asian cultures value simplicity. The simplicity is more like encompassing than the complexity. Complexity is really micro. I mean, that's the point. It's like infinitesimal, zooming in on like tiny minutia.
Yeah.
Simplicity is the opposite, which is perhaps paradoxical to what one might think if you first imagine those concepts. The simplicity is like it applies to everything.
It's like people don't understand that like trying to gain and ascertain things is a matter of finitude, but like the simplicity is a matter of the infinite, and like the infinite is bigger than anything you can accumulate, you know? And that's like what meditation is about. It's even what prayer is about, you know? Like you use the space to like detach from all your little points and triggers and like have more flow and flux between yourself and the world or yourself and God or whatever. But like we used to have all the dank, simple, healthy, wholesome stuff in all the different little Western pockets, you know, that are kind of now more prominent in the East and shit. Like, I mean, there's meditation and there's shamanism and shit all over Europe before it was kind of unified and everyone colonized each other and blah, blah, blah. But I don't know why. I can't say why, but like we just live now in this like extremely paranoid state where it's all about knowing and accumulating and like searching for evil or like, you know, it's always on. It's like always like counting.
Well, I feel like a pretty logical conclusion from a spiritualist exploration is that evil should be removed from the world. And that's a very low resolution idea, but it's a pretty obvious one. I think it's one that comes quite soon.
Yeah.
If you don't like take it further than that, it's quite easy to arrive at the conclusion that if we get rid of evil, then we can create good societies. That's like a very populist idea, and it's very easy to like hold on to that. But it can only take you so far, and perhaps that's what we're realizing only now in the West. Also, like postmodernists and the idea that we're beyond good and evil. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think Nietzsche, like, I mean, he's a mystic, really. Like, he's not really a philosopher in the sense that, like, Derrida is, you know, like, he's not academic, really, even though he studies and shit. He fucking lived out in the woods and, like, walked around and shit. Like, and I think he was, like, quite influenced by Eastern religion and philosophy as well, talking about beyond good and evil. But like, yeah, I mean, like he was trying to go beyond the dualist thought that was coming up around him and shit. I mean, it's kind of since Descartes, right, that we kind of spiraled, like, I think therefore I am, and blah, blah, blah. Like the identity. Because before that, Like, I think the philosophy and science was a lot closer to like Chinese medicine and like alchemy and stuff,
Yeah.
which like is a lot more balanced. But I think postmodernism, I mean, it's still got a lot of the same problems that modern Western society does, but it's reclaimed that idea or something.
Well, it seems like a central point of postmodernism is the idea that you can't ascertain any act to be good or evil, because it's like a contextual thing, and it's all about like the agency of the actors and their position within like hierarchical structures.
But that's still lacking the foundation that exists in other traditions, you know? Like in Chinese medicine and philosophy, everything's contextual as well, but there still is grounding for the way to do things, you know? But postmodernism is like just the fluidity. So it's just reactionary to the structuralist and modernist like ways of doing things.
Obfuscates the ground that the fluidity is based upon, right?
And you've got to have both. It's all about having both. Like, good is no use if we don't like stir it up with some sick evil. Like, so like that's what I mean about the stagnant, passive Christian meek goodness. Like, it's not actually good because it's not in relation to anything. It's just a box or whatever.
I wanted to ask you about actions that you repress because you think that they're evil. How do you get out of the patterns that prevent you from acting out on those repressed actions in a way that is good for the people around you?
I think you have to go into the space that you're trying to get to with that action. You know, like the action doesn't exist of its own accord. It's your image of the feeling or experience or space you want to be in. You know, like people who get fixated on like
sex,
panties, whatever. Like more specifically, like people who like need to go and grope someone. And it's like they can't get the image out of their head and end up doing it to release tension or convincing themselves that it's all right. The thing itself is not the meaning. Like doing it is not the real meaning. It's like they're looking for like some kind of like a feeling. Like it's an emotional thing.
Well, I mean they're looking for gratification and pleasure ultimately, right?
I don't think so. I think it's more, I mean, like, I think it comes from a place of having repressing your self-expression and then not being able to do that self-expression in a normal or like acceptable way. And then like identifying with this track, like there's like an established track of gropers or like peeping or rape or whatever. And you're like, because that is like established as a negative narrative in society, I think people start to identify themselves as negative and then be like, I'm evil, so I must be that thing.
But even before like explicit sexual harassment, there's things like, just like emotional abuse in every relationship ever. It just feels like grotesque violence is just an extension of those things that exist within all of us. I'm sort of talking more about like those parts, the initial microaggressions, incorporate the evil repressed side in such a way that you can mitigate those microaggressions as much as possible. From both like you being the aggressor and also you receiving aggression and knowing how to deal with it in a way that is productive.
Well, I think it's like it's related to like the separation between self and other and shit. And like the abuse that occurs in relationships is the same as the like political abuse that occurs, you know? It's like labeling something as evil and using that to get the gratification for your identity and shit. You know, like if it's a couple or a parent and a child or whatever. Like it's like you store up these like other experiences of abuse and then like project them onto the current situation and then be like, you're doing this to me, because like that's your belief about the world and the world's representation of you, or like your meaning in the world and shit. So it's like, I mean, it's always carrying over. There's no like beginning or end point. Like everything that you're experiencing is always like on a rhythm that you are on in your life, which basically is your being. So I think like dissolving your like reliance on the other for gratifying your identity is the goal there. But for the practice of it, like people don't want to be told to meditate really if they're not doing it already. But I think it's like when negative feelings come up, you have to feel them and not just chuck them out and not make them other people's fault. Like let that space come in, and then it's going to give you like the positive benefits. Like accept the image, I think. Like I've had like sometimes that I've been feeling real like anxious or like on edge and shit. Like I got this from Olivia actually, kind of, have been when I've been trying to impress someone or people. Like the first time I went to Japan by myself and I was there for 2 months by myself, and I felt so much pressure to do things the right way there and shit. Like I was constantly watching myself and shit. So I got a build up of like all these actions, even though they were just normal actions. It wasn't even like violent or sexual or anything. It was just like things that I would usually do at home that I like shut down because like it might not be the right thing there. I was always being careful. Sometimes you have to be disgusting and just like embody that and be like, visualize yourself and your mind as the disgusting thing. And it's really worked for me. I've like done it a few other times too when I've been like, oh, I've been trying to be too like correct again. And like if you intentionally try and be the disgusting thing, then it relieves some of that tension without really having to do anything. It's kind of like a meditative exercise, but targeted towards like that release, if that's what you need and shit. I mean, it's why everyone's like addicted to porn and abuse and fighting on the internet and shit,
Well, I think one of the advantages of being disgusting in good measure is that it sort of helps other people who like view or observe that disgusting act, and they see parts of it in themselves. If you present yourself as too perfect, it's hard for people to find like a flaw for them to like access you.
Yeah, it represses other people. I mean, because like we are a collective thing, even if we like try and be more and more separate, and like the things we do directly impact on the spaces that we share with everyone. So it's like the more you repress yourself, the more you repress everyone else at the same time and shit. And I mean, like that's like the practice that is going on in like identity politics and safe spaces and shit, is like everyone collectively working together to repress things to outside of them or outside of their psyche or whatever. It's like we've got that already. Every institution is that.
Yeah, like going back to safe spaces, the safe space is also like a sterile space, and it's also like a lie. It's like theater or something. It doesn't feel real. When I was transitioning back in the UK, I went to like a trans group, and they were really big on the safe space thing, and there was like a protocol with pronouns, and we had to like state our pronouns at the beginning of the session, every session. I'm sure it's fine for some people and they appreciate that, but my experience of it was that the very act of having this like very bureaucratic even process of cushioning yourself from all of the other people in the room was way more oppressive than any kind of like treatment I've had in cis-normative environments. And I think the reason for that is because the safe space, it amplifies the evil because it's sort of like there's zero way for you to express it. There's no evil in the room, but like all of the evil sort of like amplifies in like the internal spaces between each people. And because the evil doesn't have outlet, and evil is a way to like connect with people, essentially.
Mhm.
I mean, like speaking is not a safe act.
Well, it's open. It's blurring your body and identity with the other and with the world and shit.
Which is necessarily evil in some situations. I feel like it's dishonest in a way. It doesn't provide you with the impetus to generate or build yourself.
Talking.
No, safe spaces.
Yeah. But I mean, even talking like comes in as a way to like manipulate your representation in the world, you know? Like, not traditionally, really, but over time it has become like this way to justify your like innate impact in the world and shit.
So also the earth as an environment is not safe. The environment that we live in is necessarily dangerous. And well, the fact that we don't perceive danger in our daily lives, that doesn't obfuscate the fact that we're, designed to deal with evil and malevolence.
Well, like the thing is that danger is not evil. It's more evil to have no danger, I reckon. You know, like every utopian story ends up being about why that's evil and about how actually the whole impetus behind making something perfect is evil.
It's just putting the evil somewhere else, and someone else has to take the responsibility of that evil influence. Like pushing the evil somewhere will result in the evil pushing back. So like rather than pushing away evil, I think the proper response is to know how to deal with evil. Defense against the dark arts.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, that's my thing with the safe spaces and, like, the kind of, like, intersectional rhetoric and shit, is it's, like, all about being correct. More so than, like, good old society is. And, like, it's not about that. It's not about correct versus incorrect. It's about, for me, it's about, like, openness versus closedness. And it's, like, the more you close shit up, the more it rips, like when something hits it or when something tries to get in or whatever.
And I feel like we're designed like that on purpose. I think part of the experience of living on the earth is that we're as fragile as the fragility of events or like periods or eras. So like people don't know anything about what's going to happen next year or like tomorrow and shit. And the more you try to just like sustain this very sterile and hygienic like purity or utopia, the more you're just like delaying the build up that is like just around the corner, just waiting to enter your life and fuck you up. So like, is it not better to just like have the thing that's fucking you up like being like constant?
Like now?
We can deal with it in the way that we've evolved even to deal with it. And I don't mean evolution in like a strictly scientific sense. I mean evolution is in like harmony with your environment.
Well, yeah, I think like I so agree, and it's a really good way of putting it that like it's building up and it's getting worse. Like the longer we go repressing it, like the worse the impact is going to be. I don't know, like it's like everything's building up, and I don't think it necessarily needed to. But it is like maybe if we'd started dealing with the evil and integrating it a couple thousand years ago, we wouldn't be where we're at now. I mean, like, people are doing it. It's just the people who are working against harmony are working really hard against it, you know.
They just like want the evil in their life.
Well, yeah, everyone's desperate for a bit of that evil. Like, I mean, it's their own evil that they're trying to get back in.
Yeah, it's their own evil.
But the thing is, like, we could be sharing it.
No.
I'll share my evil with you. You share your evil with me. I'll touch your dick in the onsen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down for it. Like, it's a way better alternative to what we have now.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
It's so much less sloppy.
it's wholesome.
It's like eating your vegetables or something. Maybe he just thought you were gay. Like, maybe it wasn't even like a repressed rapey kind of thing. Like, maybe he just like was like, sick, there's another hot young gay guy in here.
Exactly. Like, I think we're sort of taught to like, if we don't know a motive, we just assume it's the worst one. So in that context, it's like rape. But it's like, hang on. There's other forms of like non-consensual sexual acts.
Or like uncommunicated or whatever, even.
Right. I don't feel like I need to default to like an interpretation of it as being like rape or something.
Well, no, the first time you told me about it, you didn't say anything. Like, you literally just said what happened. You're like, last time I went to the onsen, the guy gave me a hand job. Not anymore, he wants me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, the more I sort of think about it and like solidify my response to it, it's like I learned a lot from the experience, because I feel like his openness to like sexual conduct was like something that I needed. I feel like I have like a lot of sexual repression, so like to receive like totally like uninhibited violence,
Unconditional.
unconditional love,
Unconditional love.
was like, yeah, I mean, I'm down for it.
Did you come?
Well, I stopped him before I came because I didn't want to like come in a public onsen. But the more I think about it, I should have come and like let my semen like evaporate into the like onsen, and all of the like salarymen are just like inhaling my semen.
No one's gonna get pregnant. It's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think the originary evil is like horror. Like, I'd call it horror, and it's like, you know, the most. I mean, it's just uncertainty, really, but it's like the void of uncertainty and shit. And like, that's kind of like the common element of all the different things we've talked about, you know, is like when you don't know why and shit. You can't encompass like why it happened or what the motive was and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that people are doing that to each other is just so unnecessary, you know? Like, you can understand why someone has a different religion from you. And you can understand like why someone's gonna freak out and shoot people, you know? Like, it's not rocket science. It's like basic human behavioral understanding. But like, people have a lot of active processes and habits like that they build up in order to not understand. And like, that's what produces the violence anyway.
It's the lack of communication.
Yeah.
Ultimately. The lack of flow.
Yeah. Openness, yeah. So back to your other question, I think meditation is the best solution to most of those problems, or some kind of practice that lets you kind of integrate with yourself.
Yeah. Like, well, incorporation of the like shadow personalities.
Yeah.
I think is also pretty important. Like incorporating your like opposite sex as well.
Yeah.
Is pretty useful, I would say.
Yeah, like sometimes when I meditate, I literally like just embody my image of evil. And it often makes me feel really balanced. Because it's a safe space to do it in anyway, you know? It's not going to hurt anyone, and it's like, you're not going to be judged for it and shit. It's like becoming whole so that you don't, like, it dissolves that whole level of urges. If you integrate it, you're not constantly acting or operating on like this level of like conflict between good and evil or something.
Yeah, well, like, the conflict between good and evil isn't like a resolution between those two things, which are basically the same.
Yeah.
So if you're stuck within that domain, you can never like reach an equilibrium.
Yeah.
So like going beyond good and evil is like the realm where you have like total like understanding of those two like intrinsic and significant and productive spaces.
Well, this week's episode was brought to you by Nietzsche.
And Donald Trump.
Yeah, and Donald, nah, not really.
I don't think Trump is like that evil anyway.
It was just going to be funny to put him in the same episode as evil. Yeah, this week's episode brought to you by Friedrich Nietzsche. He was a pretty cool guy, and he was neither good nor evil, and that's why we like him. Next time we're going to be talking about romance.
I was thinking like, did you say bromance or romance?
Romance, but we can do both. Okay, so next time we're going to be talking about romance and bromance, because you have to have one for women and one for men, otherwise it's gay. No homo. I don't know. I'm keen to hear back from people about what they think and what they want to hear from us as well. And also like, share, and subscribe. #DamnPotion.
Stay evil.
You stay evil out there, guys.